Well, hello everyone, this is CJ with Cyclotron. I've sold my 2019 Street Glide Special. I'll tell you all about it. I'll tell you what I've liked and disliked about this bike, why I've sold it, just the whole rundown, how I sold it. So here we go. So first I want to tell you what the cost of ownership was for this bike. I bought it new in the fall of 2018, $29,000 out the door, not including sales tax. Then I upgraded the seat, backrest, LED headlight, turn signals all the way around, and then I upgraded to a set of 13-inch rust ornament high-performance rear shocks. So with sales tax, insurance, fuel costs on average around 40 miles per gallon, I've put 9,300 miles on this bike since I've owned it, which isn't very much. The last big trip I took was in 2019, so 3 years ago. I bought this bike for long distance riding, two-up riding. My wife doesn't ride anymore. She's had back issues. Like I said, I've been between everything going on in the world and just frankly being really busy at work. Just don't have time for long distance trips. So I'm doing all my riding these days, short hops around town, shorter trips on my 2020 Suzuki Katana. So it didn't make sense to keep incurring the cost of ownership for this motorcycle when I wasn't taking any long trips. The first thing I'll say is I never have any problems with this bike. All I did with it was routine maintenance. So with the price of this bike out the door, $29,000, a couple of grand in upgrades, insurance cost, sales tax, I'm in a 10% local state area sales tax, fuel, typically 40 to 45 miles per gallon average. My total cost of purchase and operation was about $36,000. You know, replaced a couple tires, regular oil changes, I flushed the brake fluid, so about $36,000. And I sold this bike for $22,500 to Rumble On. They're going to pick it up here in about a week or two. It's a pretty straightforward process with them. I offered it for sale to the Harley Davidson dealership 90 miles from my home, where I originally bought this bike. They were a little low at $22,000, plus I was going to have to make the 90-mile trip each way. And Rumble On was $500 more, and they'll just pick it up from my driveway. It's a really smooth process so far. I sent them all the information. They're going to FedEx me a check, and away we go. So if you look at roughly the $14,000 in depreciation and operating expenses and sales tax that I've had with this vehicle and maintenance, with only 9,300 miles on it, you know, you're talking about $1.50 per mile. Now that sounds like a lot, and it is. However, my cost per mile was a lot lower the first even 6 months, a year that I owned this bike, because the depreciation is a pretty good hit the first couple of years, but hadn't had all the operating expenses, and I had put a lot of miles on it. Most of the mileage that is on this bike I put on it in the first 8 months of ownership. My intent was to ride the wheels off on numerous long distance trips, and that just hasn't really panned out in terms of my time availability. I really never had any mechanical issues with this bike, but when I was riding my Katana more and more, I really came to appreciate the performance and handling, although it's a different type of riding experience. And I've kind of skewed more towards the technology side of things on the motorcycle. This bike's got great navigation, loads of torque, but again, for local riding, there's some curvy areas where I live. On my sport bike, it's fun to drop a gear and handle those curves up and down hill. This bike's got so much torque, it just flattens everything out. So again, it's just a different type of riding experience. What I don't appreciate anymore is just the nonsense at my nearest Harley dealership. I actually offered this bike for sale through the HD1 website. What a joke. First I picked a different dealer across the state line because I didn't want to deal with my local dealer. All they were interested in was having me trade this bike in for another Harley, which I clearly wasn't interested in doing. Same with the local dealer. They've seen featured in some respect in many of my videos where I've never bought a motorcycle from them. They're just way out in left field, kind of scummy sales tactics, the whole nine. The other thing is I restored a 2020 Roadster with my boys last year. It took forever to get the parts. And the reason is that most of these parts are coming from far-flung corners of the globe. And, that's the way things are these days, unfortunately. But Harley really doesn't disclose that. All they'll tell you is they're back-ordered, but you don't know back-ordered from where. At least with some of the Japanese bikes I've had, if there's no front forks, for example, like I had to reorder for my 600R, in the US, they said, they're all 4 are in Japan, and it's going to take 2 months to get here. Well, you know where you stand. With Harley, things were perpetually back-ordered, and dealer wasn't really interested in running the status down for me. It would just magically show up in their deliveries, and half the time they'd put it on the shelf and not even call me. So I had to call repeatedly, is the part in, is the part in? There are instances where I knew the part was at other dealerships across the country. They wouldn't bother getting it from the other dealerships. I bought many parts by calling other dealerships, like in New York or Sacramento, California. I'm just over the whole Harley corporate mentality and the deal with many other dealerships. So I'm pleased to move on to other brands of motorcycles. I still have my 2020 Roadster. I have nothing bad to say about this bike. Couple of nitpicks I have with it. I never really got comfortable with the Jiffy stand. It just seemed like it was kind of unstable and the bike was going to topple over. It never did, but there were many times where I would adjust the parking position and check and double check, because the bike would tend to creep forward on the Jiffy stand. This short screen, I'm 6 foot tall, always got wind blast in the middle of my helmet. A taller screen would solve that problem. So, it's fine to customize a bike to your own ergonomics, but I've had better luck with other brands out of the gate, honestly. But the bigger issue for me with Harley is I think the used market on these Harley motorcycles is about to tank in a big way. And in fact, even with the supply chain issues, I started looking into selling this bike back in March, and the market softened. I actually got a $23,000 offer from Rumble On at the beginning of April, basically getting $500 less for it now than my best offer a couple months ago. So that tells me that there's some softness in the market. Perhaps it's related to demand destruction or just overall concerns with the economy. I personally think the next recession is likely to take Harley-Davidson out of operation, at least under their current ownership situation. So we'll see. Nobody really wants to own a motorcycle made by a company that's no longer in business. Ask the Victory owners. Even though Polaris is still in business, they pulled the plug on Victory and said they'd provide parts for another 10 years, and resale value immediately tanked on those Victory bikes, as good as they were. So there you have it. I'm not saying I sold my bike because I was afraid Harley's going to go out of business. I'm just saying if you're going to sell a Harley, you got to do it sooner rather than later so you don't get caught holding the bag. So those are my thoughts here. Let me know what you think in the comments section. I've enjoyed this bike immensely. I'm just getting out while the getting's good. So please let me know your thoughts and stay tuned for future videos.